Okay, we're here with Nick. It's the 39th Eudoo interview. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name's Nick Winard. I'm 23 years old. I work for a digital agency in Auckland as a creative, and I've grown up in Auckland for most of my life. And yeah, that's about it really.
Cool. So New Zealand for you, in 3 words today, how would you describe it?
I would describe it as the way it's marketed to me, which is clean, green, and then if I was adding another term into that, it would be creative. And yeah, I feel like that does match my own personal opinion of what the country is. But I think the marketing of the country itself influences that somewhat as well.
Okay, so let's just on that teaser. Do you think there's a bit of a difference in the way New Zealand is marketed to the way it is in terms of emphasis? What's emphasised?
I don't think there's a difference necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, naturally, it's going to be hyperbolized to a degree because it's marketing.
Yeah.
But I feel like it does match up with the feeling and what New Zealand does stand for at the moment. I think that we are a beautifully nature-centric green country, and I think we are creative as well in a number of facets. So it's
true.
It is true, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think, what would you like to see New Zealand evolve into being? What should it be? Which may be the same or slightly different?
Yeah, well, I think the same, but I think what I would change the 3 words to is, if I could get sneaky and count this as 1 word, it'd be self-confident.
Yeah.
And that's just so...
It's got a hyphen, so...
We'll get away with that one. More about being what you're saying you are than promoting that. So I don't know how to word that exactly, but it's more about putting, I don't know if it's the policies or the actions in place so that you can really stand behind your messaging without having to say too much. The other one would be unique. So I think that we are distinctly different from a lot of countries in the world, but I think we should really strive to be so different that when someone comes to the country, they feel like they can't have this experience anywhere else in the world. And I think there's a few places like that in the world. And I think we should strive to really be in that kind of category where people feel like you can't match this anywhere else in the world. You have to go to New Zealand to feel New Zealand. And the last one is creative, so that's the same as before. I think that we should really channel that and focus on staying creative and being creative and leading the world and what we can and what we enjoy doing.
That's awesome. What it really picked up on there was this idea of unique, which is really powerful. And you talked about, creating an experience that is unique. And I just wonder if you can sort of give a sense of what is that unique experience.
What is that unique experience in terms of where I've felt it elsewhere or
here or there?
Well, I mean, an example of somewhere where I think already has that going for it a lot is a place like Queenstown, which typically does kind of evoke this feeling that you're in this Canadian ski village almost.
Yes.
But when you go down there, you feel like you're in this incredible place, and it's not just the mountains and the lake. It's the community built around that. It really makes you feel like you're in this distinctly different place from anywhere in the world. And I mean, that was kind of pointed out to me when I went down with one of my friends, and he was like, we got off the plane, and he was like, I feel like we're still in New Zealand almost. And I went, yeah, well, we are still in New Zealand.
Yes.
And he just kind of got a bit mixed up just because it was this like overwhelming experience for him to be in this like really different world but still part of New Zealand. Like he didn't really know what was going on. And like I've been to other countries, like I went to South Africa, and it's obviously got its ups and downs, but there were parts of that country where I was like, whoa, I don't think I'll experience this. Like I went to Kruger National Park for a week, and I was living in the park, and I was like, this is incredible. Like I don't know if I'm ever going to feel like this again.
Yes.
So I want New Zealand to evoke that feeling for people when they come here, and I don't want it just to be when they go to Queenstown. I want them to go anywhere in New Zealand, or at least the majority of parts of New Zealand, and go, this is incredible, like I need to show someone else this.
Yeah, no, that's a really good benchmark, isn't it? You know, we need to, that's a great benchmark, say, okay, I need to show someone else this. Are there particular people who you think embody that positive sense of New Zealandness? And it's a bit of a simple, stupid question, I know, but we're just trying to use it as a conversation.
I tried to think of someone, and this probably strikes as a weird selection, but the athlete Sonny Bill Williams for me really does that.
Yeah, okay.
To be honest, I am a big fan of him in a professional athletic sense, but in terms of his the way he goes about his life, I think that really does well to emulate what we should do as a country as a whole. So he's obviously naturally very gifted, but he's quietly confident and he's humble, and he lets his actions do the talking. And despite getting talked about a lot in a negative manner, he kind of just gets on with doing a good job. And I think that's important because I think, like, in this country we have we do get afflicted by tall poppy syndrome a lot, but I think that we just need to be continuing our successes and stuff, and just make sure we're doing the best we can do to ensure that we create a good country. Basically, we can't let other people's viewpoints get in the way of what we're doing. So I think he embodies the attitude that the country should have as a whole. Just embrace what you're naturally good at, and focus on doing that well, and don't worry too much about what other people think, because ultimately you'll be successful if you really try hard at it.
That's awesome. So what I'm hearing is really be authentic to who you are, and get really good at it, and embrace the gift and demonstrate the gift, don't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and in that sense, get around tall poppiness, because in fact you're just doing what you're doing naturally, so no one can take that away from you.
Exactly,
So thinking about the vision that you have for New Zealand, which we kind of already touched on indirectly. I said to you, right, you know, you're now in charge of New Zealand, come back in 2050. What would you like to see New Zealand like in 2050? What vision and goal would you like to see manifest? Well,
it kind of does go back to what we were talking about before. What I would really push for is to create this environment where it is distinctly different. And I think it's a lot easier in this day and age to say we're clean, green New Zealand, we're beautiful, whatever. But to be honest, there's a number of countries that could equally say the same thing. I think in 20, 30, 40 years' time, it's going to be a lot harder to say those things.
That's true.
So I think what the key is to take that into consideration and really drive decision making and policy around maintaining our environment and maintaining the flora and fauna that we have, so that it does feel distinctly different. I think it's difficult to make something feel unique and different when it's man-made, because ultimately it's all sourced from the same root place. It's all sourced from our own humanness. So I think that, like, nature is always going to amaze us more than we ever can. So let them do the talking almost, and just make sure that in 50 years' time we try and keep our country the way it is now. Because I think if in 50 years' time, if New Zealand looks the way it does now in terms of the country as a whole, I don't mean in terms of city infrastructure or what the buildings look like, I mean in terms of the forests, the oceans, the animals within that, then I think that's going to be really incredible.
That will be an extraordinary achievement. And in fact I suspect that, you know, as you say, it'll be even more amazing, because the world will be, unfortunately, probably the environment will be further degraded. So when I say to you, you know, New Zealand, and I ask you, Nick, to call to mind images, you know, if I call you offhand in your kitchen making a cup of tea, and I say, New Zealand, what are the first things that come into your head?
Well, I printed off a picture of Wellington City.
Oh, fantastic.
So
hold that up for the camera.
Sorry, black and white.
Black and white, Wellington City, that's great.
So to be honest, I'm not particularly fond of Wellington. Like I couldn't live there just because it's a bit small for me.
Yeah.
But what I really do love about Wellington is that it is a creative hub.
Yes. Okay.
And they really have built the city around the natural landscape they have there. So I think that if we could get to a point where every place in New Zealand really takes on its individualism and allows that to designate how the city looks, like I think Wellington has done to a degree, I think we'll be in a much better place. So as much as I absolutely love Auckland, and I can't imagine living anywhere else in New Zealand, I still think that places like Auckland and Christchurch to a degree, and Hamilton can take points from Wellington and to really help let the creativity grow in their cities by creating a more beautiful, a more creative city, basically.
What I'm hearing is amplify the character of the city.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get across, is amplify the character of the city and take those unusual, quirky parts about it and really make them the important parts of the city, because ultimately it's easy to make cities that are all the same. It's about those unique differences that really make them characteristic.
That's great. That's perfect. So thinking about companies within that context that you admire, that represent this positive New Zealand, are there any companies that fall to mind, that come to mind, sorry? 42 Below Vodka, which sadly has been bought out by Bacardi semi-recently. So no longer a New Zealand company, but definitely created in New Zealand and developed in New Zealand. Really takes on that, I think. So they are just confident in themselves and in their product, and use black humour basically to promote their product. So that they're not scared of having a laugh at themselves or their own country if it's to help people get the idea. And I think that kind of really evokes the idea of self-confidence. Like we know what we're doing is good. We can have a laugh about it, and we can have a laugh about all these things, because ultimately we know that when you drink our drink, the quality of that product is gonna overwhelm any kind of negative connotations that we're putting forward with our branding or whatever. So I think that they do a really good job of taking all the quirky parts of New Zealand, amplifying those to the rest of the world, and showing how different and unique they are, as well as having a really good quality product to back that up. Yeah, that's fantastic. So thinking about the big kahuna question, how do we unite humanity positively? How can the world come together? Is there a goal that's sufficiently big for us all to pull together?
This sounds a bit unusual, I think, to some people, and I think I've always had this kind of frame of mind, and it's that humans have a really big problem with having a human-centric point of view. So we always try and develop the world and create things that help humans, and people take that as helping the world. But
that's
ultimately,
a great distinction.
Ultimately, we're not helping the world.
No.
We're helping the humans of the world.
Yes.
So I think what will help unite us is realizing that just like everything else in our ecosystem, we are an animal, like we are a form of life, and that we should coexist.
Yes.
And I think not only would that help us in terms of like maintaining our environments, reducing waste, not being so hurtful to other species and stuff like that. I just think that it will unite us in the sense that we are all the same and we're all driving towards the same goal. Because I think it's so easy, especially in this day and age, to completely segregate humans from the rest of the planet.
Yes, it is.
And people often say like, oh, that's for the good of the world or whatever, when in actuality it's probably the worst thing for the world, but great for humans.
Somebody said there's no other species on the world that when something along the lines of, when our numbers increase, everything else decreases.
Yeah, well, The Matrix has a fantastic quote around that point, and it's like parasites take on a victim and completely deplete its resources until it's
until it's
done, and then move on to the next.
Yes.
And the only other thing that does that is human beings with the environment.
Yes.
So I always found that quite compelling, that we are parasitic to a degree, that we find a host environment, completely deplete the resources, and then move on to the next place to do the same. So
yeah, we'll run out of paddocks.
Yeah, we will run out of paddocks. So
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that's a really refreshing answer to the question. So thank you.
No worries.
So lastly, this project, what if any benefits? Let's assume it goes well, and I'm asking you to be wonderfully Nick-centric and give you permission to be Nick-centric, ironic given what we were just saying. And what can Eudoo do for you? What can this project do for you?
I think, here we go, here's some more Nick-centricity. Good. If everyone listened to what I had just said and the thought processes that have been employed, I think what that would do for me, and ultimately every New Zealander looking to be successful in other parts of the world, or in New Zealand itself, is give us our own brand just because we're New Zealanders, so that people associate us with being confident, quality, great at what we do because we are New Zealanders. And I think to a degree there's some of that already. I think that we do get respected as hard workers across the world, and we do get respected as humble and stuff, but I think that we can, like you said, amplify that. And if we can amplify the attitude of the company, and then that obviously trails down and you get associated with that for being part of that community. So I think that it just helps with, it's like if you've got the title doctor in front of your name, people are just like, well, you're a doctor, so all of these things must be true. You must be a great person, you must help others, you must, if the same association can be made when they find out you're a New Zealander,
it's like all these associations.
Yeah, oh great, you're a New Zealander, so
you must be this.
Yeah. So I think that ultimately would be fantastic, just to have that association strong enough that people realise it and react to it.
Yeah, a thought came to me while I was listening to you, which I haven't had before, which I'll share with you, which is, it'd be lovely to see New Zealand to be the most strongly branded country in the world.
Exactly, it would be fantastic.
That's kind of where I go with amplifying what you've said.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really inspiring thought for me personally. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I think that's awesome as well. I think there are currently countries that are strongly branded, but maybe through not necessarily through their own branding process, assumptions made and stuff like that. So
Marlboro Man, Coke, McDonald's probably do a lot for America.
Yeah, exactly.
Right or wrongly, you know?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll stop rolling then, and thank you very much, Nick. That's been fantastic.
No worries. It was fun.